Infamous Trickster Gaming.
What is happening, everybody? Thank you guys for checking out this video and welcome back to the channel. My name is Infamous Trickster and it's been a while, guys. I've been trying out a new game. The game is called Once Human. What I can tell you guys is I've absolutely been obsessed with this game recently. I've got over 200 hours put into the game at this point. And yeah, I mean, there's so much that you can do in the game, so much in-depth detail. And it takes a while to understand it, but I'm planning on putting a couple of videos together to help some of the newer people to the community, to the game, with different aspects that they might be finding difficulty with, and what might be able to help even maybe some veteran players as well. So what we'll do is we're going to jump into this game, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down something that you guys have been asking for actually a lot recently, is my Frost Vortex build. Man, I love this build. It's so good. It's so good in terms of just AoE damage, ad control, and just overall DPS charts. I'm usually at the top somewhere there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the build. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and break down the build for the Frost Vortex. Okay, so first and foremost, we are going to be utilizing the M416 Silent Anabasis. This is the Frost Vortex weapon here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the features that are on this weapon. 10% chance to trigger Frost Vortex on hit. Hitting a target with Frost Vortex generates an ice crystal, and the cooldown on that is 1.5 seconds. Ice crystals automatically shatter after 15 seconds, dealing Frost Elemental status damage equal to 100% PSI intensity to nearby targets. Frost Vortex damage bonus applies. Ice crystals can also be shattered by shooting them, which increase the damage they deal to 300% PSI intensity, lessened effect against players during PvP. Increases Frost Elemental damage by 20%, increases it by an additional 10% for every ice crystal shattered for 15 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. First and foremost, let's go ahead and break down what we're looking at here. So, as you can see, there's not a very high chance to trigger the Frost Vortex on hit. To be honest with you, at certain times, I've gone through almost an entire clip before I even get a Frost Vortex to spawn. But what I have done is I've found a way to kind of counteract the unpredictability of spawning a Frost Vortex. So what I do is I actually carry a bunch of Frost grenades with me. What that does is it literally spawns a Frost Vortex at the enemy's feet. As soon as I shoot them with the first bullet of my magazine, I'm guaranteed to get an ice crystal. So that's one way to counteract it. Again, because it's such a low trigger chance of 10%, you kind of got to figure out a way to make it a guarantee in a way. That what we're going to be looking at next is the 1.5 second cooldown of generating the ice crystals. Now, what we're going to try to do with this is we almost want to make this weapon shoot like a soaker, the way the Last Valor does, or the Cam. Lower fire rate increases the amount of ice crystals we can get in one magazine. So what we're going to try to do is lessen the fire rate of the weapon that we're using, which is the 416, because it does have a relatively quick fire rate on it. It's much faster than the Valor, but what we want to do is we want to reduce the amount of bullets that are coming out of the weapon, because there is that cooldown of 1.5 seconds for the ice crystals to spawn when we're hitting the target in the vortex. So the lower the fire rate, the more crystals we're gonna get per magazine, and this goes hand in hand with another aspect of the build as well. And we're gonna get into that when we're talking about the gear set. All right, so that is the Silent Anabasis, and we're actually just gonna look at the mod that we're running. So for this one, I'm using Frosty Blessings with the Talents suffix. So what this Frosty Blessings does is when Frost Vortex disappears, we're restoring 10% of our HP. This is very nice because of the fact that as long as we're spawning Frost Vortexes, it's a nice addition to be able to just keep your health topped up all the time. Again, we are going with the talents suffix, so we're looking for elemental damage and status damage. Primarily status damage, because status damage is a little bit more difficult to come across when we're looking at mods and that kind of thing. So I would prioritize it as status damage, and then elemental damage, damage to elite enemies, and damage to great ones. So those are the 4 that we're looking at in all of our mod. The next piece that we're going to be looking at is our sidearm. The sidearm we are using is the wildfire. For the weapon features on here, we are looking at a 60% chance to trigger bullseye when hitting a target. There is an 80% chance to spread the bullseye effect to one enemy within a 15-meter area. If there are no enemies within the area, weapon damage plus 25% for 10 seconds. And when hitting a weak spot of marked enemies, attack plus 3% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. To be honest with you, we're not really using this weapon as a primary mode of attack. This is realistically just for the bullseye buff. So the bullseye here, if we're looking at it, you can see the marks the target and inflicts a vulnerability. So regardless of whatever type of damage, vulnerability is going to increase damage that the enemy is taking once we put this bullseye effect on it. Now there is a 60% trigger chance, which isn't bad. Now what we're really looking for is there's an 80% chance to spread the bullseye effect. Now because of the fact that we're using the frost vortex with the ice spikes and the AoE damage essentially with the whole build, spreading the mark is phenomenal, because again, more than just one enemy is going to be taking that additional damage now. So it's always nice to see the bullseye jumping. The good part about the bullseye is you can always notice when it's jumping, because it outlines a target through walls and all of that as well. If you guys have never noticed, you can see the outline of a target in blue. It's like a staticky blue color. So yeah, I mean, the more enemies that have that vulnerability on them, the better, because AoE damage is targeting all of these targets in an area, right? So that's what we're looking at for the sidearm. So let's go ahead and look at the bullseye one. So this one, wildfire, we are using the vulnerability amplifier, precision suffix. So the bullseye adds an additional 8% vulnerability. So that speaks for itself. We're just increasing the amount of damage that an enemy can take once they've got the bullseye effect. The melee weapon, you can really use anything you want. Again, I mean, I don't really use anything particular. This one here, the cookery, is actually giving increased sustainability with restoring health and that kind of thing. So whatever floats your boat, really, because the mods on these don't really change much. Next, we are going to be looking at the gear sets and the breakdown of those. So as we can see here, we are using a 2-piece of the Blackstone set. We are using 3 pieces of the Shelterer set, and we are using the Snow Camo gloves, which is our key gear. Let's go ahead and look at the set bonuses that we're trying to aim for here. So the first one doesn't really do much, because as of right now, I'm not on a Way of Winter server or scenario, so it's kind of just there. We're looking at the 2-piece bonus for this set. So the 2-piece bonus is upon dealing elemental damage, which is our Frost Vortex and our Ice Spikes, gain 1 stack of Warm Sensation, elemental damage +2. So the Warm Sensation is just the name of it. It doesn't really have to be in a warm climate or anything like that. It's just the name of the buff that we're going to be gaining from the 2-piece. Warm Sensation grants 2% elemental damage increase for 2 seconds, and triggers 1 time every 0.5 seconds up to a maximum of 5 stacks. So that's going to be giving us a total of 10% elemental damage increase. So that's the reason why we're going for the 2-piece here. So for this, I'm using the mask and the helmet for the 2 pieces. So let's go ahead and look at the mod that we've got in here. So I am currently using the Deviation Expert with the talent suffix. So the range on here is decreasing by 25%. We're getting a 10% fire rate increase. But what we're really aiming for on here is the status damage by 20%. So again, because we're gaining an increase in fire rate, remember back to what I was talking about earlier, we want to decrease it as much as possible. This one here, just because we're getting a 20% damage increase, status damage increase, it's kind of a toss up whether you want to go with less, another mod, or getting the status damage. For the attributes, we're looking at elemental damage, damage to normal enemies, elite enemies, and max HP. So those aren't the best ones, but elemental damage is on there, and damage to elite enemies, why not? And a little bit of HP to help you out. So after the helmet and the mask, we are going to be looking at the shelterer set. So you can see we are using 3 pieces of the shelterer set. So the first one is not bad. We're looking at a bit of tankiness with the status damage reduction. So 50% damage reduction from status damage. That's not a bad thing. Number 2 is what we're looking at in number 3. So number 2, we're looking at an increased flat damage of 8% elemental damage in general. So that's for everything. That's going to be affecting our frost vortex. That's going to be affecting our ice crystals, all of that. Number 3 is the 3-piece set we're looking at. Each weapon hit grants 1 stack of deviant energy. Now, not to confuse this with your deviation that you have in your backpack. This is an entirely different. Deviant energy is just the name of the buff that we're going to be getting each time we apply a hit to any target. So deviant energy, every stack of deviant energy grants 1% elemental damage. Effect can stack up to 20 times. Reloading removes half of the total stacks. Now, chiming in back to what I was mentioning earlier about trying to not reload as much as possible, this is going to be giving us a 20% increase in elemental damage. As soon as we reload, it removes half of our stack. So our 20% that is getting halved to 10%, and we have to rebuild it up again if we're gonna want the maximum output from the 3 pieces. So the gloves are a really, really nice addition to this set. They synergize perfectly well with the silent Anabasis. I think it's really only effect is with this gun, because I don't believe any other weapons spawn those ice crystals the way the silent Anabasis does. So let's go ahead and break this down here. We are looking at the snow camo gloves. So this one, what it does is when an ice crystal shatters, 4 additional ice missiles will launch at nearby enemies, dealing status damage equal to 40% PSI intensity to targets hit, 60% to players, and it also applies the frost vortex damage bonus. So pretty much what happens is when you spawn vortex at the base of an enemy, you shoot the crystals that spawn there. What happens is the initial damage from the ice crystals will do its AoE damage. In addition to that, you're getting 4 ice crystal missiles that launch at targets that are close by. So that's a huge bonus, because I mean, I've had a lot of times where I'm hitting the crystals, but the AoE damage only goes so far, you know what I mean? So what happens is it'll shatter the crystal, but the enemy's already beside me and it's kind of spawning, exploding far away from me. So it doesn't really benefit in that sense. So these are a huge bonus and a benefit to the silent Anabasis crystals, ice spikes that spawn. So pretty much what happens is we're going to try not to reload as much as possible. So as long as we're having a large magazine, so as of right now I believe I have 64 in my magazine for the M416. So we're looking at for the big magazine, and the reason why I chose the boots is to look at this mod here. So Ruthless Sweeper talent suffix. Again, we're looking for the talent suffix in all of our mods. So after getting 2 kills, refill 100% of your magazine from your reserves. So now notice how it doesn't say we're reloading, we're actually just refilling. Because as soon as we hit the reload button on our weapon, we're losing half of the stacks again. So we're down to 10% damage, elemental damage increase. So this is just refilling it to 100%. So as long as we're making sure ads are dying, again, as I mentioned, we're looking at talents suffix. So we're looking at status damage, elemental damage, elite enemies, and great ones. This here is actually the perfect suffix that has all of the perfect attributes that we're looking for in our mods. So let's go ahead and look at the rest of the pieces of gear that we've got. So we looked at the helmet mod. We're looking at next the mask mod. So we're looking at lingering frost. Again, talent suffix. The longer the duration of a frost vortex, the higher its final damage, up to 60%. Again, we're looking for primarily status damage and elemental damage. This one has normal enemies and HP, so not that bad. We're still looking for primarily status and elemental damage. Heading over to the chest piece, when using a healing shot, movement speed plus 20% for 2 seconds and refills the magazine from the inventory to 100%. Again, this one works quite well with the not having to reload as much as possible. If you guys are anything like me, I'm a chronic reloader, and it's an issue. It's something you have to kind of get over at some point to be able to maximize the benefits from this build. Again, talent suffix, so we're looking status damage, elemental damage, and damage to great ones. All of those are great attributes to have. Next, we are looking at the pants mod. So we're looking at the abnormal increase. When the magazine is empty, status damage plus 10% for 12 seconds stacks up to 3 times. So we're looking at here status damage and damage to enemies. Haven't found another replacement for this yet. We're looking really just at the status damage. This doesn't really work well with the build. I've been trying to find something else that works better so that I don't have to reload, because I'm only benefiting from this mod if I'm reloading, right? But we're looking at the status damage on this one for the attributes and the damage to normal enemies, which is not bad. For the gloves, we are looking at status damage increase. So this is the status enhancement, talent suffix again. So this one on the attributes, we're looking at elemental damage, status damage reduction, reload bonus, and damage to great ones. So the only real benefits that we're getting from this one are elemental damage and the damage to great ones. Haven't had a better chance at getting anything better than this at this point, but we'll run with what we can get. And the boots we've already covered. So that's pretty much what we're looking at for this here. I'm going to show you guys the breakdown that I'm looking at. So what you kind of want to do, you want to keep the frost elemental damage bonus and the status damage bonus close in numbers, because it benefits off of both of these stats. Now, as you can see, my status damage is almost 30% lower than my frost elemental damage, and this is the main reason why I was mentioning you want to try to get more status damage as opposed to elemental damage, just because elemental damage is going to be a cakewalk when you're looking for mods. Status damage, not so much. So that's why you can see for my helmet, I was using the increase in status damage by 20%. If I'm throwing that away for something else, just because of the 10% fire rate, it's not going to be much of in terms of an option there. So these are the stats that we're looking at for this here. So I'm currently sitting at 76.8% status damage and frost elemental damage bonus at 108%. Now we're going to go ahead and look at the cradle that we're using for this as well. So I'm currently using an AR. So I'm using the anti-void rifle, sustained suppression, tactical combo, automatic weapon enhancement, sprint, status enhancement, deviation master, master tactician. So these are the options that I chose for my cradle. So that is going to be it for today's video, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and checking out the video. This has been by far one of my favorite builds that I've tried so far in the game. I've tried a couple here and there, but none of them have actually stuck as well as the Frost Vortex, and I just love how everything synergizes so well. I'm going to do a bit of min-maxing as well in terms of mods and that kind of thing to see what we can do. Obviously increasing the stars on the weapon as well, and the gear pieces always has a benefit there. Now, if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure you're liking, comment, and subscribe to the channel so that you're not missing any future videos that I am going to be putting out in the future. Let me know in the comments which videos and what builds you guys want to see coming from this channel. I'm just going to leave you guys a bit of the gameplay in terms of just to be able to showcase really how good this build is. So that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Infamous Trickster, signing out.